When it comes to the AT, sometimes there are lessons that you can research ahead of time, you can Google things, you can watch YouTube videos, and then there are other things that you just have to learn the hard way. But the good news is I went ahead and made a ton of mistakes for you. So today I put together a list of 57 things that I believe you need to know before you hit the Appalachian Trail. And learning these things right now is going to save you some serious headaches down the road. Now, before I get started, if you are planning to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail next year, or you're doing any other thru-hike, consider blogging or vlogging for the trek. When you blog for the trek, you're able to write about your adventures on trail and share those adventures with tens of thousands of hiking-obsessed readers. And when you vlog for the trek, you're able to record your videos and they'll go up right here on the Trek channel. And obviously, both of those things come with a ton of different benefits. So if you're interested in learning more, head to the description. There's some links in there for you. All right, we've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Tip number 1 for through hiking the Appalachian Trail is that it is important for you to know that you're not going to be surrounded by a ton of backpacking professionals. And you don't need to be a backpacking professional in order to through hike the trail. In fact, in 2024, exactly 50% of all of the hikers that through hiked the Appalachian Trail only had between 1 and 7 nights of previous backpacking experience before they hit the trail. And only 17% of hikers had more than a month's worth of experience. So the good news is, whether you're a total rookie or you're a seasoned backpacking expert, it doesn't matter because all sorts of folks through hike the Appalachian Trail and all sorts of folks finish every single year. Plenty of people learn along the way and they still make it to Katahdin. Number 2, there is all sorts of random hiker lingo out there that you need to know. So here are some of the basics. Nobo means northbound. Sobo means southbound. A flip-flopper is a hiker who is not hiking the trail all in one continuous direction. Maybe they're starting in Harper's Ferry and then they're hiking all the way north to Katahdin, and then they're flipping back to Harper's Ferry and then hiking all the way south to Springer. There are all sorts of ways to do it. A tramily is a trail family, and a trail name is like a hiking nickname that typically you're given by another hiker. Mine was Sassafras. And Sassafras was given to me by my friend Nutter Butter. The bubble is the big group of through hikers that typically all starts right around the same time. It's usually in April, and there are just so many of them, and they're all moving in one big bubble north that people just started referring to them as the bubble. And if you want an estimate of where that bubble is supposed to be, you can go to wherearethehikers.com. A resupply is typically when or where you go to buy all of the food that you need for the next stretch of trail. If you've ever heard of folks talking about white blazing or redlining, that refers to hiking on the actual Appalachian Trail, as compared to blue blazing, which is when you are still hiking but you're not technically on the AT. Maybe you're on a trail that runs parallel, and sometimes those are beautiful detours or they're shorter detours, but it just means that you're not actually on the AT. A good example is the Virginia Creeper Trail, which comes out of Damascus. A ton of people choose to do that trail instead of hiking on the AT in that section because it is prettier, easier. I think there's ice cream on that part of the trail, so a lot of people prefer the Virginia Creeper. And yellow blazing is when you skip a section of trail. Maybe your friends are a few days ahead of you, so you are skipping north to catch up with them, or a car that you caught a hitch with is willing to drop you off a few miles north, and it wouldn't be worth it for you to go back and catch those miles that you missed, so you just skip past it. That's yellow blazing. And yellow blazing tends to get a bad rep on the AT. How you feel about that is up to you. Pink blazing is when you are changing your hike up in some way. Maybe you're hiking faster or you're slowing down because you have a romantic interest on trail and you want to either catch up to them or slow down to hike with them. In fact, when I was on the AT, I knew a guy who hiked 40 miles in one day just to catch up with a girl that he was interested in. A privy is a pit toilet. Typically, you're going to find those around all of the shelters. And speaking of shelters, on the AT, you're going to find shelters pretty much every 20-ish miles at the very least, all the way from Georgia to Maine. And they're usually going to be some sort of lean-to, or occasionally they have 4 walls and a door, and they're really nice. But what they look like and how many amenities they have typically varies from state to state. Like Tennessee has a bad rap for bad shelters. And if you aren't going to use a privy on the trail, maybe you're going to dig a cat hole. And a cat hole is when you dig 6 inches into the ground and you do your business and then you cover it up. And sometimes people might take a surface poop And that's when they don't bother to dig a hole and they just go ahead and do their business right on the ground. And that is definitely not leave no trace friendly, and it is super looked down upon. Don't do it. Now, if you're not staying in a shelter, maybe you're off trail and you're staying at a hiker hostel. And a hiker hostel is a hostel that is pretty much designed for hikers. They are found in trail towns or along the trail. They're usually ran by maybe past thru-hikers or folks who have some sort of connection to the trail in some way, and they will have all of the amenities that hikers could want. Maybe they'll have boot dryers for wet shoes, or they'll have all sorts of extra outlets everywhere. Maybe they'll have a resupply. So hiker hostels are very hiker friendly. And that's important because the further north you get, you're not going to see as many of those. So it's important to know that if you are going to be in a town with a hiker hostel, I really recommend you stay there, because you're really going to miss them when you get further up north and you're finding way more hotels which are way less hiker friendly. Also, in a hiker hostel, you might find a hiker box. And a hiker box is typically just a big box full of stuff that hikers left behind. Maybe they didn't want their Sawyer anymore, or maybe they switched out their fuel canister but it still has some life in it. Maybe they found a dehydrated meal and they really didn't like it, so they had one they didn't use and they popped it in there, or they have some snacks, whatever. Hiker boxes have all sorts of stuff, and they're usually found at hiker hostels. And sometimes the stuff that's in there isn't just from hikers. Maybe it's from the hostel owners or people in town, or maybe from trail angels. And a trail angel is typically somebody who is not hiking the trail, but they want to support hikers in some way. So maybe they are shuttling people around for free, or they are allowing folks to mail things to their house and then bringing them to them. Maybe they are setting up near the trail or at a trailhead and they're passing out hot dogs and food, whatever. Trail angels come in a lot of different forms and they do all sorts of different things, but if you see a trail angel and you're having a really, really hard day, it's really going to turn your day around pretty much like 9 times out of 10. Speaking of shuttling, a shuttle is transport either to or from the trail or in a trail town, getting you from place to place. When you're hiking, you don't have a car, and if you aren't going to be in a place that has Ubers or taxis or whatever, you're going to really be relying on the generosity of strangers to get you around, or you're going to be paying for some kind of shuttle. Now, shuttles are typically ran by somebody who lives in town and they're just looking for maybe a little bit of extra cash, or they're doing it for free because they love hikers and they want to help them out, or maybe they run a hiker hostel and they're willing to come pick you up and bring you to the hostel and then drop you back off at trail. Shuttles come in all sorts of different shapes. But also know that if you do need a shuttle, I really recommend that you give them ample notice. The last thing you want to do is get to a trailhead and you call a shuttle and you're ready to get to town, you want to shower, and they're out of town or they're not able to come get you for like 3 hours, and now you're in a situation where you have to wait around and wait for somebody. Also, it can be pretty rude to just call somebody and be like, yo, come pick me up. You know, these people don't live for hikers and to get them around. So if you do need a shuttle, just go ahead and plan ahead. Just know that if you are getting picked up for free by somebody, maybe you want to throw them some money for gas. Now, if you do need to get in touch with a shuttle ahead of time or call a hostel to make a reservation, whatever, if you need to do that, it's important to know that you're probably going to have better service on top of a ridge or at a summit than you would if you were further down into the woods, because the higher up you are, and especially on a clear day, you're going to get better service. And if you're down in the woods and there's tree cover everywhere, or it's a cloudy day, you're going to have a harder time getting in touch with the people that you need to get in touch with. And speaking of cell service, if you're in a situation where you really need to reach somebody, but you haven't had service for a really long time, and you don't think you're going to have service again for a while, if you have a Garmin, you can send text messages. You can, on a clear day, point your Garmin up to the sky, and you can either type in on your phone what you want to send to the right person, or you can type it in on the device itself, which is way clunkier, but you can do it. So if you have a Garmin, you can get in touch with folks via satellite. Just know that it might take a long time, and you're also going to need their contact information. So if you don't have service and you can't get their phone number, you aren't going to be able to text them on your satellite phone. So again, plan ahead. Now, you may have heard of something called a PCT bear hang, a Pacific Crest Trail bear hang, and this is a type of bear hang that uses a stick and a clove hitch knot, and you'll throw it over a branch and you'll rig it up so that your bag is hanging essentially right in the middle of the air away from the trunk of the tree, and that way a bear isn't just going to cut your rope off the base of the tree and let your food fall down and eat it. Some people carry bear cans. I wouldn't carry a bear can on the AT because they are really heavy. If you do decide to carry a bear can, the benefit is that you can just toss all your food in there at the end of the day and then just like throw it somewhere and not have to worry about, you know, getting your bear line down in the morning or having to throw a rock over a branch and then hope it sticks. So it is easier, but you got to carry it and it's bulky and it's awkward. So I would not recommend a bear can on the AT. And in super bear prone areas, you may find bear boxes or bear poles, which is nice because you don't have to worry about getting a perfect bear hang up at the end of the day. So keep an eye out for those. It's just important to know that a bear box may be bear proof, but it's not always mouse proof. There can be small cracks at the bottom where mice can get in and get to your food, so just keep an eye out for that. In fact, if you're planning on just sleeping with your food, which is not encouraged by the ATC, just be aware that in areas where there are a lot of mice and where there are a lot of people and there's a lot of crumbs, there's usually a lot of mice, so there's a lot of mice on the AT, especially around shelters. If you're planning on just sleeping with your food, you may wake up in the morning to a little hole in your tent where a mouse chewed its way in the middle of the night looking for food and then bopped back out later. So just know that it's not always bears you need to watch out for, it's mice. This goes for chipmunks too. Also, where there are deer, there are ticks. So in areas like Shenandoah where there are deer pretty much everywhere, and every shelter has a resident deer, or you're going through meadows where you're seeing a lot of deer, there's going to be ticks there. There's going to be deer ticks there. So just know when you see deer, you may see ticks. And make sure that you do your tick checks. And speaking of tick checks, if you don't know what that is, a tick check is when you or a friend look over your body to make sure that you don't have any ticks embedded in you at the end of the day. After a long day of hiking, either through long grass or whatever, at the end of the day, you should be doing tick checks every single day. You should also have your friends look in your hair because, yes, ticks do fall out of trees, off of branches, into your hair. Now, if you do find a tick embedded in you, it's very important that you don't just use fire to try and burn it out of you, or you don't just rip it out with tweezers. You want to make sure that you use a tick key or you're really, really careful removing it, because some people say that when you squeeze the tick or put it under extreme stress, it might vomit diseased blood or whatever back into you. I don't know how true that is. I'm not a doctor, but I do know that if you rip a tick out and its head is still embedded in you, it might get infected. So make sure that if you do have a tick, you are removing it correctly. And when it comes to ticks, I think everybody knows that Lyme disease is probably the big one that you want to watch out for, but it's important to know that along the AT, ticks don't just potentially carry Lyme disease. They can carry all sorts of stuff. For instance, there's alpha-gal, and alpha-gal is notorious for making people allergic to meat. And speaking of diseases, when it comes to Lyme disease, it's important to know that not everybody gets the token bullseye mark when they are bitten by a tick that is carrying Lyme disease. In fact, only about 70% of people that get bit by a tick with Lyme disease end up showing the bullseye mark. And speaking of getting sick, along the AT, I'm sure that if you've looked up the AT, you've probably seen the word norovirus here or there. Norovirus is a virus that happens typically around the bubble. It is I believe a food-borne illness, but essentially it's a stomach flu, and it's spread by people puking or pooping around shelters or in privies, and you get it on your hands and you touch your mouth and you get really, really sick, and you do not want norovirus. The only way to avoid norovirus is to stay away from hot areas where there's a ton of people and a ton of sick people who are all displaying norovirus. You're hearing about people puking near shelters, or there's cases or outbreaks around you. You want to avoid people when that happens, avoid shelters, avoid privies. You also want to wash your hands, because hand sanitizer does not kill norovirus. And if you're getting really close with people, say that you are single and mingling with people, maybe hooking up with folks on trail, you're also opening yourself up to potentially getting norovirus, because it does take a few days in order for it to settle in once it actually gets into your body. So just know you may have it and you don't even know that you have it yet. And speaking of being single and mingling, in 2024, 50% of thru-hikers reported that they were single. So if you're heading to trail and you're single and you're hoping to meet other single folks, you'll probably do it on the AT. Now, something I really want to talk about is the mental game of thru-hiking the AT. You will hear folks talking about the physicality of it, how tough the climbs are, and how much you're hurting the rocks and the roots and the bugs, the bug bites, and being strong and training for the AT is really important, because you don't want to get hurt because your body isn't ready to take on such a big challenge, but you also want to make sure that you're training your mind and you're ready for the mental side of things, because on a really, really hot day or a really, really cold day or a rainy, sleety one, or when you're being bothered by thousands and thousands of bugs in your face or mosquitoes and they're chasing you around, on days where it gets really, really hard, how strong you are is not going to keep you on trail. How strong you are mentally is going to keep you on trail. So just be ready for that. Also, when it comes to the mental game, make sure that you have tools in your toolkit that you can go to when things get tough. This can be a personal mantra or a list of whys reminding you while you're on trail, or somebody that you can call back home that can reassure you and make sure that you're feeling good about getting back on trail. It's important to know that when things get tough, you have people in your corner or things you can turn to help motivate you again. Also know that if you're starting in February, you need to know how to keep yourself warm. When you wake up in the morning and it's 20 degrees and you are just absolutely freezing, you want to know that you're going to be able to get out of your sleeping bag and put on your warm puffy and your fleece and get back on trail and feel warm and ready for the day. And you want to know that when you get to camp that night, that you're going to be crawling into your warm quilt with your sleeping pad that has a high R value, so that you know that you're not going to be tossing and turning all night just because you're super, super chilly. You need to know how to stay warm on the AT. So that's base layers, mid layers, puffies, fleeces, down booties, glove liners, down gloves, rain mitts for your down gloves, all of the things. Make sure you do your research. Another thing to know about the AT is that people come and go. You're going to meet people on trail that you have a strong connection with, and you're going to be around them for a long time if you're lucky, or maybe you'll be in a tramily together. But the reality of the situation is more likely than not, you all came to trail on your own and you happen to meet on trail, and people have their own schedules, or they hike faster or they hike slower, or people are going to get injured, or people are going to flip-flop. So you're not always going to be around the same people forever. People come and go. So make sure that you are getting people's contact information, or you're taking pictures of people so you never forget them. Also, on the topic of people coming and going, sometimes that is a good thing, because you may run into people that you don't get along with. Hundreds of people hike the trail every single year, and you're not going to have a strong connection with everybody. You're not going to like everyone that you meet. And it's just like regular life. You're not going to like everybody that you meet out here in the real world. So on trail, if you run into people that you don't like, you can either slow down and let them outpace you, or you can speed up and try to outpace them. It can be pretty easy to get away from folks if you don't like them, or you want to avoid them or get away from them, whether that is taking a 00 and letting them get way ahead of you, whatever. You can take steps to get away from people. People come and go, but in a good way. Another thing to know is that the trail can be really expensive. There used to be this rule of thumb that you only had to spend $1 for every mile that you hiked, and then at some point that changed into $2 for every mile that you hike, and now I would say it's closer to $5 for every mile that you hike on the trail, and it's going to add up because of food and gear and resupplies. And it's really important to know that the southern half of the AT, the first half of the AT, is significantly less expensive than when you get to Harper's Ferry and you start heading into New Jersey and New York and New England. Things get really, really expensive up there. Lodging is more expensive, food is more expensive. So do not blow half of your AT budget on the first half of trail. And speaking of it being expensive on trail, the trail is going to be as expensive as you make it. If you are taking a ton of zeros and you're always getting dinners in town and drinking a lot and partying a lot and going into cities, and like, it can be as expensive as you want it to be. On the other side of things, if you're hiking faster and you're hardly ever spending time in town and you're eating a lot of cheaper foods, you can make it a fairly cheap endeavor. But ultimately, how much money you spend is up to you. And another thing to know is that gear is really expensive. So make sure that you have some money stashed away, whether it's emergency gear fund or something. Just know that at some point, maybe your sleeping pad is going to pop, or your tent pole is going to snap, or your backpack no longer fits you because you've lost a lot of weight and now you need a new backpack. Just know at some point you may have to spring for some new gear, and that can be really expensive when it happens, so just plan for that. That being said, if you do need to spring for new gear, you don't have to wait to get to an outfitter in town, even though there are plenty of those. You can, for instance, buy from a cottage brand online or order from Amazon, and you can get it mailed to a hostel or a post office. Just know that if you are ordering something and getting it mailed to a post office, a lot of post offices are closed on Sundays. So if you get to town on a Sunday, you may unexpectedly have to take a zero to wait till Monday when it reopens to get your package. So make sure you're planning for that. Now, you're going to hear a lot about mail drops when you're on the AT. A lot of folks will have friends or family mail them boxes full of gear or resupply or new shoes, and those will be sent to a post office or a hostel, and that's their mail drop. That's what they were looking forward to either resupply them or get them their new gear or whatever. Another thing that people do is something called a bounce box. And a bounce box is, for instance, a box that you get mailed to you in Franklin, North Carolina, and you take some things out and then you decide, well, I don't really want to carry my gloves right now. I'm going to put them in this box. And you stash some stuff, you take some stuff out, you tape it back up, and then you mail it to another post office ahead on trail, so that when you get there, now you can reopen that box, you can rifle through it, close it back up, and then mail it again ahead on trail. And you can bounce these boxes from post office to post office. Just know that not everybody does mail drops, not everybody does bounce boxes. That is totally up to you. Just know that when it comes to, say, a pair of ultra shoes that you use, or topos, or a specific pair of shoes that you use, for instance, or maybe a filter replacement, something that you're not going to be able to find just in the middle of nowhere in Virginia on the AT. If you need something specific sent to you, you're probably going to want to get that mailed to a post office instead of just relying on getting to the next town and hoping that they have it. And finally, if you are going to mail something to yourself or have somebody mail it for you, what you're going to write on that box is, please hold for AT Thru-Hiker, because if something is at a post office for too long, they may return to sender, and the last thing you want is to get to town and your box isn't where it was supposed to be. So make sure that whether you're ordering something or family is sending it to you, that you're writing your name on it, and then also having them write, please hold for AT Thru-Hiker. If you know when you're going to get there, you can even put the date on there. So it's a good idea to just keep that on there so you're never missing a box. And the final thing that I want to talk about is, it's important to know that memories fade. When you're on the AT, every day is going to feel bright and shiny and new, full of new adventures, full of promise, and it's all going to feel so immersive and crystal clear. But the reality is, at some point, you're going to go home. And if you don't take the time to record some of the mundane things that happen every day, or some of the people that you meet, or the things that you feel, if you don't take the time to commit these things to memory, take pictures, journal, blog, vlog, take videos, whatever. If you don't do these things, one day you're going to get home and you're going to have nothing to look back on. And those memories are just going to continue to get fuzzier and fuzzier the more time that passes. So the last must-know thing when it comes to the Appalachian Trail is that as fun as it is, it's going to take a little bit of work to make sure that when you go home, you still have all these memories and you can look back on them for years. All right, guys, that was 57 things that you need to know about through hiking the Appalachian Trail. Did I miss anything? Is there anything you disagree with? Let me know below. And again, if you are through hiking the Appalachian Trail next year or any other trail, whatever, make sure you look down in the description so you can learn more about blogging or vlogging for the trek. If you liked this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up or leave a comment below, and make sure you subscribe to the trek so you never miss another video. My name is Sassafras, and happy hiking.